it's a pretty significant and common form of fallacy. All right, number 8, 2 wrongs make a right. So we all know the phrase that 2 wrongs do not make a right, right? When we say 2 wrongs don't make a right, we are acknowledging the fallacy, or that it is not true that one wrong justifies another. So whenever you justify one person's poor behaviors by the inadequacies of someone else's, that's always going to be a 2 wrongs make a right fallacy. So for example, Jones is always being mean to me, so I can handle it from Tiffany's as well, right? As though Jones being mean is in some way a justification for other people being mean. Right? 2 wrongs do not make a right. So you can always look at it in that way, to saying that's wrong. 1 wrong does not justify another. 2 wrongs make a right is not true. Right. Number 9, the bad analogy. All right, so when you make an argument by analogy, you're making an argument that compares one thing to another, trying to understand some quality of one object in terms of the qualities of another. When that metaphor breaks down too quickly or does not represent things in a just way, in a way that makes sense, it's a bad analogy. So, for example, I wrote here, books are like pencils. They both make a lot of words, right? But it's a bad analogy because books make words in the sense of they make them when they are read, versus pencils make words in the sense that they make them when they are being written. So the analogy doesn't really hold between books and pencils in the same way that this person wants it to. It doesn't make sense. It's a bad comparison. Right. Number 10, the appeal to tradition. So the appeal to tradition fallacy is the fallacy of saying that things have always been this way and that's why they should continue to be that way. Right? So for example, when we were children, we were all told the story of Santa Claus, and it was the same for our parents, right? So the next generation should also believe the same stories that we did. And so justifying lying to our children on account of we were fed the same lie, right? Maybe if you want to say that it was fun for us and so it will be fun for them, that would not be an appeal to tradition. But the fact that we experienced some lie doesn't mean that we should just automatically pass that lie along, right? That's the appeal to tradition. Number 11, circular logic, also known as begging the question. When you have an argument that presents circular logic, the conclusion is presumed somehow by its issue or its reason, right? So, for example, if you say that global warming is a myth, and then go on to say, as your reason, there's no other explanation for the cold winter we're having, right? Saying that there's no other explanation in itself presumes the truth of the claim global warming is a myth, right? Maybe there are some other explanations, but this argument does not allow for any other argument to be true except its original claim, right? So it has a circularity to it. The reason presumes that the conclusion is true. So the reason, it doesn't really act as a reason. Number 12, the false dilemma or either or fallacy is a fallacy that reduces a real world into something that has this very limited number of choices, right? So let's say it's kind of like the black or white explanation of the world, or in general, let's say you have 5 options and someone presents you with 3. That's also going to be a false dilemma. It's when you have a problem and the solutions that are presented to you are in any way fewer than the actual number of solutions. So, for example, people are either good at math or at language or both. And if you're neither, then you're stupid. Right? Actually, there are many ways of being intelligent. There's emotional intelligence, there's artistic intelligence, there's musical intelligence, and so on. There are many, many, many ways of being smart, right? So if you reduce the ideas of what it is to be smart to just language and math, then that's a false dilemma. That doesn't present the real world in any accurate kind of way. All right, number 13, equivocation. If you look at this word, I know we've gone over it in the past, but if you look at this word, you can break it down to two parts. On the one hand, it says equal, and on the other, it says voice, right? Voca, voice, voca. Right? To equivocate is to give equal voice to two meanings and reduce those two meanings to just one, right? The use of equivocation lets the specificity or the particularity of difference dissolve into the broader category that two things might belong to. So, for example, apples are like oranges. They're both like fruit. Right? That is an equivocation between apples and oranges, even though they are so unlike actually if you are to think of them in their own particularities. Or, for example, I don't like cats or dogs. They're both furry and so they shed, right? Those are equivocating between cats and dogs insofar as the fact that they both have fur, which doesn't really go into what you'd have to say in order to understand why you don't like dogs in particular and why you don't like cats in particular, even if shedding is a commonality that you dislike. In any case, that is equivocation. Number 14, the appeal to pity. An appeal to pity is an argument that is again an example of a red herring insofar as it avoids an issue, but it avoids the issue by bringing up some emotion that is distracting or not relevant to the question at hand. So, for example, if a person's like, can't you give me a better grade on my exam? I fell in love earlier this semester, and that's been where my mind has been all day. I can't concentrate. I've fallen in love, right? It's saying my emotions are such that my capacity to address a problem is diminished. So it's just trying to distract an argument from what's really at stake according to the way that you feel. And finally, number 15, our last Latin phrase of this section is ad populum, which translates as to the population. It is basically the everybody's doing it fallacy, right? So if it's just saying that everyone is doing it or that nobody is doing it, and that as a result of everybody acting in such a way, that's why you're going to act in such a way as well. So for example, you don't need to read books, nobody does. Or you should wear thick sweaters in the winter because that's how most people stay warm, right? The reason to wear a thick sweater when it's cold out is not that other people are doing it, it's that the sweater in itself will provide warmth to you, right? It's not about following a trend, it's about solving a problem, right? So everybody else doing it is not really the reason why you should do it also. So in that case, also an ad populum fallacy. And that does it for our fallacies review or introduction. We will talk about this more in person on Saturday. But meanwhile, thanks for paying attention. I'm going to post this same list of fallacies in our